Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Clouds, Edge to Edge Transformation. And as we have discussed before, this transformation is happening at various levels, but it also brings up some challenges along with it. So let's look at how we can find balance in the midst of all this craziness, in the midst of all this acceleration that's happening. And today with us is Lakiba Pittman. She's a great balancer. Lakiba, tell us your story,
Oh my,
your journey like.
what a story. I grew up in Palo Alto, California. I was born in California in the Bay Area, and I went through the Palo Alto school system. And because Stanford University is nearby, I had friends and family and activities where I would go on campus when I was a kid. I just grew up in a city and in a time when learning was presented in a fun way. From an early age, I was interested in learning. I would go to the library all the time. I remember in the fifth or sixth grade, one thing I like to do is look at books about different parts of the world. I would read the books and then I would come back to school and I would teach what I had read in the latest book. I wasn't even thinking at that time that I would become a teacher. If I look back, I can see signs that could potentially be in my future. I was also a really empathic, kind of sensitive kid. I could kind of pick up on the vibe when my classmates were sad, or maybe they didn't have clean clothes, didn't have lunch on a particular day. I would get my mom to make an extra peanut butter and jelly sandwich to take it to school so my friends would be able to eat. So I don't know if I was conscious of it in the way that I am today. I can see some elements of the type of child I was, kind of super sensitive, artistic, kind of creative. And I didn't know where it would exactly take me. By the time I got to college, I actually majored in creative arts because I loved art, I loved theater, I loved poetry. I was actually singing at that time. I started singing somewhat professionally in my early teens. I didn't know what I was going to do with a creative arts degree. I was kind of like what they call a starving artist. I wasn't actually making any money from my art, but my life was enriched through art. Eventually, I had to get a regular job, started working at Hewlett Packard. As a matter of fact, Dave Packard's daughter went to a middle school and high school with me, so I knew her then. And when I started working for Dave and Bill, they had this concept that they call the HP way. The HP way fit right in with me and my philosophy about how you treat other people. If you treat them well, then they're going to want to do good for you. They're going to want to work. They're going to want to aspire. I thought I was going to be there a couple of years. I ended up being there for 23 years. After I left there, I started consulting, eventually found my way to Stanford's Center for Compassion. I was already a meditator. In high school, I started with transcendental meditation. I had been meditating for a long time and having this empathic childhood. It wasn't a far reach for me to start to be interested in this notion of compassion. It was kind of how I taught It was how I connected with other people. Yeah, it was great for me to find out that Stanford is looking at the neuroscience behind being nice to other people. That intrigued me. So now I'm teaching. I'm a professor at a local small college. Kind of, it's focused on business and psychology. And then outside of that, I still write poetry and have some performances. I'm still an artist, have art shows, and I teach courses and workshops on trauma healing, but also mindfulness and compassion. I have 4 grandkids, and anybody that's a grandparent knows what that feels like.
And that's a full-time job.
That's true. That's true.
Well, Lakiba, I was very lucky to have met you and become your friend during the Stanford Center for Compassion Days. And
Right.
we all had our reasons to be there, and it was amazing. You mentioned the HP way. I was very fortunate that I also worked for HP. In what ways did it really give shape to your career? I really felt that it touched me in a way that no other company did.
Well, thank you for asking me that. One, I had many different jobs at HP. I started in the audit department and I was in finance. They had this thing called train the trainer. You could learn how to be a trainer while you kept your regular job. One unique opportunity that I had, HP gave Stephen Covey a grant when he was writing his first book, and he came and he did a workshop. I took that workshop. I was very interested in how can you help people and help myself to be more in tune, more successful. What attributes could I use? Eventually, I became a trainer while I was still working in the audit department. I would teach welcome to HP, orientation to HP, communications at HP. And I noticed that it was almost like you never heard any complaints from employees. But when they would come to these workshops, they would kind of offload all of these experiences and ways that they felt. I started compiling, not really consciously, but in a way, I started noting what these issues were. I was friends with all of the admins. The president at the time was John Young. I was a good friend with his executive assistant. I made an appointment to see him. I talked to him about this insight and feedback that I was receiving from different employees about how they felt in the workplace. I had it all documented. I had all my list of things there. He received it quite well. He told me, "You belong in HR. That's the place that can nurture and create programs to help our employees feel better." I got a job managing the global employee survey process, measuring the wellness of the organization. So there was a quantitative part, and then there was the opportunity to write written comments. Well, I'm getting these from around the world, and I'm just overwhelmed by these individual story of people's experiences when they were treated from their point of view fairly or unfairly. I just wanted to play a role in helping HP honor their employees by recognizing and listening to their concerns. That was kind of the beginning to use my empathetic nature. What good is it if I'm just feeling that other people are unhappy? Can I do something about it? Can I help bring their concerns to the people who can create change or to the people in power. That's an underlying theme of my life. Whether it's in the workplace, it wasn't so much social justice issues, but as I continued in my career, I also was very involved in communities of color in my locale that were under-resourced. So I was working for the people in corporate America, but I was also working for the surrounding communities that didn't have the same resources.
That's quite a journey. I remember that when I was at HP, it was a real techie company, lots and lots of great geeks.
That's right.
How was it like to work with so many engineers to help them find that balance?
One way that I did it, and I would suggest to others, is practicing yourself, meaning I was a meditator. So I was already tapping in to this aspect within myself that contributed to my personality and the nature of me. You can tell when someone's stressed or when somebody's angry or when somebody's confused or when somebody's cooling it, or you can tell in your workspace who you could go to with a problem and maybe who to avoid on a certain day. So part of it was that somehow I was able to be authentic in that environment. I don't know if they would have actually hired me had I applied for a regular job at the time. It was very conservative, right? Most companies. This was before people could have piercings, and it was certainly before people wore locks or head wraps or different things in the workplace. And I actually got my first job there as a temp. I had been a temporary employee, but I was really good. I was sent to the prime assignments, and I got called to go to HP and I set it on fire. I was so good at what I was doing, they offered me the job. I've always wondered, I'm not sure I would have gotten the job had I just applied and come in from off the street without demonstrating my temperament and my work quality. I'm trying to say that being myself helped. Even though there was a fast pace and things had to get done, I was able to fit into that because my eyes were always on the prize. Every department and company I've ever worked for, I always read their vision, their mission. Who are they? Where do they want to go? How do they plan to get there? And I would figure out how I can attach myself to the goal. So that was another quality that I brought in. My temperament was kind of easygoing. I was always focused on the task at hand. And then I snuck a few things in. It was Dr. Benson. He wrote a book, The Relaxation Response. It was one of the first books that chronicled the efficacy of meditation and what it can do for you physically. After that book came out, I got a bit of courage and I set up a thing that I called Quiet Hour. A few times a week, I would reserve a conference room and I'd turn off the lights and I'd have bubbly water music playing in the background, and people could just come in and relax. I didn't call it meditation. At that time, people weren't saying meditation in the workplace. I just called it quiet time, like an opportunity, eat your lunch and then come in. I would kind of sneak it in those ways. And then people would get curious. They go, is this meditation, or do you know how to meditate? I would kind of bring a little in, but I never really forced it. It was just more someone's being curious about me, and then I might introduce it.
The way you describe it, it reminds me of quiet time in nurseries and like pre-K, where
All right,
help
right.
help little children relax. As adults, we also need to slow down, and that's an amazing way to introduce
I
it.
totally agree. As a matter of fact, when I was in kindergarten, I remember nap time. And I say this to my college students all the time. Just think if you continued with nap time through your doctorate degree. In class, if you start, maybe not nap, but I start all my college classes with what I call quiet time. They come in, we turn off the lights, and we just sit for just a few minutes. So there's a
Yeah,
way to integrate it in. Yeah,
when you were at HP and I was at HP, the world changed dramatically.
that's
We
true.
went from everything offline to step by step everything online, 8 hours a day to 24 by 7. There's always something to do.
Yeah,
And you can't give the excuse that you don't have access. You have 24 by 7 access now. Quiet time is actually diminishing. It's not just 1 hour off 8 to 5, but now we'll be lucky to get 1 hour off of the 24-hour cycle. See,
true.
has technology helped people do meaningful things, and in what way has it helped, hurt, or challenged us? And do you see that among your students, among the people you work with?
Well, I do, unfortunately, during COVID, especially, all of our classes in the schools and colleges and universities, well, everybody was shut down. So all of my classes were online then. We did the best we could. The positives is you can create a connection with a group of people that meet, say, 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or as in the case of when we had to do school for the semester, we were 16 weeks, which is a long time to have a class online. But for learning, it's possible. And then some of the workshops that I do, I have a workshop coming up at Stanford that's on cultivating compassion and using mindful tools. It's like a 5 week online. And then a few months ago, I did one on trauma healing and resilience. So the good news is that you can connect online. Just wonderful exchanges can occur, especially if you utilize the breakout rooms and ways that people can connect one on one or in small groups. If you're engaging, if you have a few game like things, polls, using the chat effectively, there's ways that you can use technology to accentuate the point that you're trying to make. On the other hand, kind of on the flip side of it, I have a course that I teach that's called Cultural Expressions in Media. The first 8 weeks is all about the impact of old media. So we start with television. What was their first introduction to any type of media? Well, today, their first introduction isn't the television, it's their cell phone. It's some type of social media is their first interaction with technology. So it's different, but there's some positive ways, of course, that technology can be utilized. What I've also found is the ways that we used to have access to information, those seem to be minimized. Media is maximized. Back in the day, my parents would read the morning newspaper. They didn't have access maybe to what was going on in the world instantly, but they'd read the paper, they'd see different points of view. There might be some criticism of an issue. And today, who knows where the truth is coming from? It's hard to find the truth. Most of my students are trying to find it in social media, on TikTok and on Instagram. They've kind of given up Facebook a little bit. All the parents and older people are still on Facebook. I'd say there's a good part to it and there's a challenging part to it. One of my assignments is related to what we call digital detox. They can keep track on your phone how much time you're spending on different apps. So that's a homework assignment where they have to pay attention for so many days and log it. Even they're surprised at how much time they went down that hole and how long they were in TikTok. So it's similar with any tool or invention. You could kind of get hooked on it and believe it has an efficacy that it does not truly have. You can a little bit lose your connection to real people in the real world. At least when I'm using technology, I'm trying to be more mindful, more conscious and aware of my own choices. But every now and then I get caught up in some Netflix series, and before I know it, I've been there hours watching a series. It can catch anybody. Yeah,
It's almost like an infection, how we get attached to all these media.
that's right.
And isn't it strange that with all these rich media, with high speed connectivity, 4G, 5G, and availability of all kinds of information, you can take a phone and call anybody that or text them. We have an epidemic of loneliness in the midst of all these plentiful connections. What's going
Yeah.
on? And what should we
Yeah,
do?
the soul, the spirit needs an authentic connection. It's not impossible, but challenging to get that through an external tool. Even when I'm doing workshops on Zoom or Google, all the different platforms, I have to intentionally create opportunities where I'm connecting. It could be if I tell a personal story that kind of brings someone's attention in. You have to be savvy and think of ways that people can have real connections utilizing technology. For me, it has to be somewhat intentional. Like when I'm planning a workshop or something that I'm going to do online, okay, how can I have people connect in a real way? And knocking on wood, fortunately, after the workshop, people tell me that's the best part. I felt like I could share. I felt like I really connected. So that's important to me as a teacher, professor, workshop leader, consultant, whatever you want to call me, because that's what I want. And I want it to be real. I want to be able to connect as well. There's a place for everything because I'm in an academic setting. Sometimes in academia, it's not touchy feeling. It's lecturing and giving the points. The heart is a little bit not emphasized. The information, the data, the concepts, that is to the forefront. But I bring my heart into everything that I do. If you come to my class, you're going to get some heart in it.
Yeah, I can see that you moved from being an artist to a hardest, the one who brings the heart in. So,
I like that.
speaking of personal stories, each one of us came to the Center for Compassion and Altruism at Stanford for some reason. What was your personal story? What brought you to the Center for Compassion, and how did it change your life?
I was so intrigued because one of my areas of expertise is diversity, inclusion, equity, justice, belonging. That was my last job at Hewlett Packard. When I left HP, I did some consulting for a while before I started teaching diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and belonging at the college level. The way that I teach it is from a compassionate root. I point out that there are many dimensions of diversity: our ethnicity, our color, our culture, our languages, our age, LGBTQI, our abilities, disabilities. There are many ways that we're different. There are many dimensions of diversity. And then I would say, but drop down just below that. We're all human. And maybe drop down below that. If you believe in that, there's a spiritual realm. I was already using the notion of compassion in my teaching before I knew there was a center for compassion. And I went to one of the Wisdom 2.0 conferences, one of their first ones. Dr. Doty was a speaker, and he said, we have this new Center for Compassion, and my ears kind of caught on fire. I was like, Stanford has a Center for Compassion? I was like so curious. Within a couple of days, I wrote him and said, I'm so interested. And then he let me know they were getting ready to do training for their first cohort. He supported me in being able to get in the program. I'm already doing this, but what are they teaching? I didn't know anything about the science behind it. I'm a lifelong student. Got into it out of curiosity. Like, what are they going to say? By then, 20 years, I was already meditating. After getting in the program, then I kind of got it. Okay, they have a pedagogy, they have a way that they're going to introduce this notion of compassion. I got more interested as the program continued. I had been exposed to all of these healing protocols. I was very often the only Black person in the workshop or the only person of color. So I had a real desire to share these concepts and these healing modalities with people of color who might not have the resources to pay thousands of dollars to take a workshop or even $100 to take a workshop. I was trying to find my community of, okay, I'm going to learn this. It's a certain protocol. It has a healing aspect to it. It's something you can do over your lifetime. Where's my group of people that I want to introduce this to? I did get a chance to offer it in East Palo Alto, California. That was one of my first classes. Someone helped me get a facility at Stanford to host my first class. Pretty diverse. I had people from different countries, different ethnic groups, different languages in my first class. I did get a chance to offer it in East Palo Alto. The population was primarily Black, but also Pacific Islanders, under-resourced community. Now I just offer it anywhere and everywhere I can. Like I said, I have a couple of workshops coming up on Stanford campus.
That's wonderful. And it's such a small world. I met one of your music friends, Rachel Bagby, at 2.0, and she's such an
Yes,
amazing lady. She
yes,
uses music as a form of healing and
yes,
bringing people together.
yes,
And Melissa Green introduced me to the work in East Palo Alto.
yeah,
And we brought Project Happiness initially, and then Seeker also showed up there. What
yeah,
an amazing way to connect the dots, bring people inclusively together.
right.
Now, one might ask, now that you are a professor of business and psychology, what's the place of compassion in business and psychology? And how do you bring about that kind of integration?
Well, thank you for asking. It's like a little bee that's buzzing around my head. I never stop learning. So I went through the program for the Center of Compassionate Leadership. I was able kind of to get an angle on how to introduce compassionate leadership into companies. I've been working on a design of a syllabus so that I could teach compassionate leadership in a business school. In academia, they're kind of seeing it less as a business tool and more as the humanities or more healing, like in that realm. To be honest, whichever realm they accept the course in, I'll go for it. I'm willing to offer it either way. I do believe that the time has come for this notion of compassionate leadership to be something that leaders aspire to, not just for the employees, but for the planet. We want people to be compassionate to one another, but also to cultivate this notion of compassion for the environment, for other people, especially people that may not agree with us. Let's try to introduce that notion into the world.
Very true. I worked with Dr. Jim Doughty. I initially tried compassionate leadership. The jargon wasn't working, so I said transformative leadership. How can we transform what we have to build a culture of leadership, not dominating one another, but working together collaboratively with care and compassion and be much more successful with vendors, with customers, have that emotional connection, have that social connection as well. It's wonderful. Again, it's a lifelong learning.
It
Every
is.
time I teach the class, it's a little more grounded. Thank you for sharing all this. What's a good way to bring about harmony rather than stress?
There are things that we can be doing from day to day at the beginning of the year so that by the end of the year, we already have a pathway to some inner calm. That's why many times meditation, going for walks, things like that are called practices, right? Meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is a practice. Compassion, think of it as a practice. What I find is the more that I practice from day to day, having a moment where maybe I close my eyes, maybe I listen, maybe I take a good deep breath. So you don't just do that once in your life. You have to be doing this daily so that you have a roadmap to tune in to that calm that's inside you. There's always going to be a little bit of frenetics in the world. That's life. Life is living and producing different vibrations all the time. For me, though, I try to remember to practice a pathway to my own internal peace so that even in the midst of energy, I can stay relatively calm. Does it work every single time? Maybe not. Maybe if I'm in a long line in a grocery store, I'm starting to feel a little crazy, then I might start taking some good deep breaths. So it impacts me to some degree, but the 280 days of meditation or calming or working in my garden, walking my dog, fooling around with my plants. Those days that I did that helped me. See those waves behind me? I'm kind of riding the waves. So I would say take some time for yourself every day to just take a breath, close your eyes, look at a sunset. If there is one, it's winter now. Maybe you can't see the sunset. Find that thing that causes you to feel peace and touch it, some of it every day.
So you can't just have a chill pill for a few days. You need the chill pill every day. And
Yes,
that's what the doctor ordered.
that's what the doctor ordered.
You've been an artist all along. Do you find expressions of your inner calm in your art?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking me that. No one's ever asked me that. My art is very much attached to my inner being. One thing about art for me and for others is it's like an honoring of an expression that wants to come through. You get out of the way a little bit. The judgment, is this good enough? You kind of breathe that out, and then the art comes in. If I'm drawing or if I'm writing a poem, sometimes the little critical voice comes in. Well, what is that? Well, what are you saying? The little critique kind of comes in. What I have found about art, it's like a gift that is continuing to flow. If I let it flow, it surprises me afterwards. I might write something, and then maybe a month later, I'll look at that poem and I'll go, who wrote that? It's like, wow, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I was much more critical of my art when I was younger. I was comparing it it doesn't look like this, and it doesn't look like their art, and it doesn't look like this, and I'm not as articulate as that. A lot of judgment when I was younger. Now, a little bit of judgment, not as much at all. I allow it to be what it is. I've learned how to give myself some grace.
I guess we are approaching the golden years and the platinum years.
Exactly. And speaking of that, I love the cultures. I'm getting more familiar with cultures that really honor the elderly, that really honor people as they're aging. My son and family, we all went to the Big Island in Hawaii last year for my birthday. My son travels all over the world, but it was my first time going to Hawaii. We had 15 people. We went to different parts of the island. Everywhere we went, he said, "It's my mom's birthday." The
Wow.
honoring of a perceived elder was quite touching and quite overwhelming. And I thought, okay, this is what it should feel like when you're getting older. In America, I don't know. Not so much of an honoring of the elderly. Could do better.
In all traditional wisdom cultures, elders were the ones who passed down what they had learned to the next generation.
Exactly. Exactly.
What a joy talking to you, Lakiba, and to people out there. This is why I talk to people, to get different perspectives. Yes, we are going into this craziness with new technologies, new ways of doing things. Things are getting faster, things are getting easier. And yet, the restlessness within is also getting more acute, feeling, oh my God, I need some time off. I need a digital detox. I need some forest bathing. It's time to really look into that. I want to hear what your experiences with technology are, in what way all these technologies are helping you, and how are you facing some of the challenges. So, what a wonderful gift, Lakiba, to hear from you about all the different things you worked on and are continue to work on. I had no idea that you and I both went through the HP way, and that has helped us along with the Stanford Center for Compassion and many other practices. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Big hug.
Big hug.